Hello, my name is Trenton Huey, and I'm the Senior Director of Data and Front-End Engineering at Vida Health. And I'm here today to share a playbook that we're using to leverage our data-driven platform to help transform how we deliver care. So before we jump in, was hoping to get a quick pulse check on what folks are interested in today. So if we could quickly kind of get a show of hands, who here wants to create more value with their data? All right, cool, most folks here. All right, question number 2, who here wants to build more executive buy-in with their data platform? All right, a bunch more hands. And last one, bear with me. Who here wants to transform their business with their data strategy? All right, cool. All right, well, thank you for entertaining my quick audience poll. I'm confident that everybody should hopefully get something valuable from what we're going to cover today. So here's the playbook for data-driven success that we're using at Vida Health. Number 1, integrate into value delivery systems. Number 2, encode complex decision triggers. Number 3, build a production-grade data platform. Number 4, establish a bidirectional hub and spoke. And number 5, demonstrate data value chain creation. And so we'll be double-clicking into each of these to give some insight into how we're approaching this data strategy at Vida Health. And the idea is to give some insight into the design of our data platform, more so than the technical implementation, but the framework should be used as a way to outline how to decide what to build, not necessarily how to build it. One other thing to note is these steps are listed in sequential order, but in reality, they might happen in parallel. Some projects might be focused on one step, while other projects are focused on a different step, and that's okay. Because in reality, the idea is if you can go kind of end-to-end 1 through 5, you should be delivering some value with your data platform, but there's always an element of choose your own adventure when thinking about how to kind of build out a data platform into your business. So a little bit of background about Vida Health. We are a virtual care management platform that delivers programs to help members manage chronic conditions such as diabetes, hypertension, obesity, depression, anxiety, pretty much all chronic conditions across the acuity spectrum. And one of the most unique parts about Vida Health is that we're a value-based care provider that offers 100% fees at risk, which means that we put our money where our mouth is, and if our members don't get healthier, we will give up to 100% of our fees back to our customers, which is an awesome thing to do from a member health perspective and doing the right thing. But it also means that we are very, very motivated to make sure our members get healthy as efficiently as possible. And one of the main ways that we're doing that is with a data-driven strategy using intelligent data-driven systems, which is why that this playbook is coming in handy when building out a data strategy that's really helping transform our healthcare strategy. All right, so jumping into step number 1, integrating into value delivery systems. And so when we say value delivery systems, we're talking about downstream applications that are closer to the end user experience. So this might be outreach enrollment campaigns, it might be member mobile applications, it might be provider dashboards, or back-end business revenue collection systems. And the idea is that we want to take our data platform and integrate it as closely and as deeply into these downstream systems as possible, because that's where we've found that more value is created from the data platform that we've built. And so as part of this process, it's important to really define who is your anchor user. And so in this case, we have our members. And so meet Paige. We have social demographics like her age. She lives in Pasadena, retired teacher. We have biometrics such as her A1C or her BMI. We also capture lifestyle behaviors such as how much she's exercising or and how she's eating. And we also have personal factors that touch on things like financial challenges or family challenges, because all of these pieces of data really connect and factor into her health journey. And so it's an important step when thinking about what data we want to push downstream is by starting with the anchor user to really list out all the pieces of information that we want to consider to push into those systems. And so now that we've defined who is our anchor user, it's important to map out all the different stages where we can deliver value through Paige's journey. And so in this case, we can personalize her enrollment, we can stratify her program pathways, or we can automate clinical workflows. And depending on the different data attributes that Paige might have at any given time in her journey, we might change how do we want to outreach, which program modality do we want to put her into, which intervention do we want to prioritize. And these attributes will update and continuously change over time. And so it's important to really get an end-to-end map of all these places that these data points can get into the experience for Paige. And so now that we've listed out these different stages of her journey, we also then start to inventory the actual tables, the data sets, and the related attributes that we're considering for putting into these downstream systems. And so this is a way that we've just listed out some tables here, and you can see the use cases across the columns. And the idea is that we want to use this as a guide to help us prioritize which data sets do we want to build into the platform first. Because as much as, on the previous slide, we saw kind of the vision of all the delivery endpoints, and in a perfect world, we would take all the data and put it into all the places. But in reality, you have to start somewhere. And so this exercise is a helpful way to really help us focus in on which data sets to focus on first to build the most value across the most use cases to give us the biggest bang for the buck. And then what we do is we take that inventory and we start to really focus on building end-to-end data pipelines. And one thing to note here that we found really effective at Vida is that we want to go from source schema to canonical schema all the way down to destination schema in the downstream delivery systems. So we have a medical and pharmacy claims data pipeline here, and I'd say most teams, and it's very common for data platform teams, I've been on many of these teams as well, we focus really on the first two boxes, right? Going source to canonical, and you get your central data platform, which is fine. We should keep doing that. Teams should do that. We're going to continue that process as well. But what we're really focusing on is how do we pull those data sources from the source schemas and pull that thread through all the way into the downstream schemas, because that's where the value is really being created. And in reality, the destination schemas are all different. Salesforce has a different schema, our backend MySQL table has a different schema, our revenue collection system has a different schema, and in a perfect world, all those schemas would be the standard and match our canonical, but in reality, they don't. And so what we found is by designing end-to-end pipelines from the beginning, it's helped us create a more effective, impactful data pipeline from the start. And so this is something that we've really emphasized when thinking about building any new pipeline or maintaining pipelines, is how can we think end-to-end from start in the source to downstream destination schemas at the end. Cool, so step number 2, encoding complex decision triggers. So at Vida Health, which I think is pretty common for a lot of healthcare tech companies, a lot of the kind of value that comes from data platform strategies is with decision support. And at Vida, we're really focused on how do we not only provide data in dashboards and reports to other decision makers, but we want to actually encode those decisions as much as possible directly into the data platform. And so at Vida, one of the most important decision flows is how do we decide and recommend which pathways to give to a given member on their health journey. And so for Vida, there's 3 main inputs. You have intervention libraries, you have member attributes like we discussed before, and then you have contract objectives, which define things like population health goals and things like that. And the idea is that the combination of these different attributes all factor into different decisions that could be made along that health journey that could deliver the most optimal chance that a member will get healthier as efficiently as possible. And what we've really focused on is taking this concept and building it directly into our pipelines themselves. So we go further than just showing data on dashboards, but you're building the decisions that were made in using those dashboards and build it directly into the pipeline itself. And so one of the ways that we're doing this is you can see a screenshot here of some of the specs that we've defined for these program stratification decision trees, where we wanted to really kind of dig into the actual decisions that are being made and encode it directly into the pipeline itself. And so we've started to parameterize different variables that go into these decision-making processes and list out end-to-end, what are the inputs from various medical pieces of information? What's the logic and combinations and heuristics that then map to various program stratifications depending on a given member's situation? And this essentially turns into encoded files into the data platform. And so we have a seed file here from our dbt platform where essentially those decisions get encoded into seed files, transformation logic, or other pieces of kind of data sets. And using more modern data stack capabilities with things like Fivetran, dbt, Looker, Rupert, the idea is that we're able to really encode the decisions directly into the actionable pipeline to make the data platform more useful for the business. All right, so Moving on right along, step number 3, which is probably the kind of the core of what we're going to be talking about in this playbook, is how do we build a production-grade data platform? Because this is where we want to really not only build, but operationalize everything that's going into our data platform with the tools that we just talked about, and make that really a ongoing, living, breathing thing with all of those modern data stack tools. Because at Vida Health, we're focusing on building data-driven applications to get to this North Star. And so at Vida, our North Star is how do we improve outcomes simultaneously with reducing cost? And from a technology perspective, we're focusing on building member and provider apps, which is our rocket ship. And we want to have a data platform that is deeply integrated into that application experience because we have data sources as the fuel, metrics as our compass, and our optimization models as our engine. And you can see that, not only visually, but we can see that we want these things integrated so our total technology stack is not just the apps and the data platform over here, but it's integrated into one technology system. And so from an architecture standpoint, you can see here, this is our production architecture flow, where we have our front-end applications on the top, like Android and iOS and various web apps. And you have your middle layer, which is our back-end databases. And the foundational layer is our data platform. And so this is where things like Fivetran, dbt, BigQuery, Rupert, Looker, things like that live. And you can see that we're not only having our data platform collect data from these front-end applications, but you can see the arrows pointing back in to trigger those downstream decisions and delivery systems back into the front-end applications. And this is something we found is extremely important to creating value because, I'd say I've been on many of these teams where you have your production architecture system, and then you have your architecture flow here, and then you have a dotted line to your data platform, and then it's like data warehouse, which is not bad. That's still okay. It's still adding value. But we've really focused on is how do we pull that data architecture diagram, both conceptually and also from a implementation standpoint, and pull that into one unified production technology stack that has production applications and data-driven platforms all in one view. So it's not just dotted line over here, but it's all integrated into one place together. All right, but the way to do that, because it's not easy to get a production data platform to be production grade, is we used a technical systems maturity checklist. And so you can see here, we listed out different attributes that we wanted to have with our data platform to really get it to be production grade. And so this is similar to a lot of the other talks we've been talking about, at Coalesce and with dbt, saying, how do we get to software development principles? And so this is where we listed out, do we have monitoring? What are SLAs? Do we have unit testing? What are our release management processes like? And we use this as a guide to say, okay, we're good here, we're not good here, and let's go and improve in the areas that are yellow or red so that we can really be building something that's production grade so that when other platform technology pieces want to connect with our data platform, they can do so in a high-performant, reliable way. And so one of the most important parts has been our dbt release process and really maturating how that looked, because previously, we'd build things into our data platform, our ETL, it would ship, things would happen, mostly good. Sometimes there would be issues, sometimes you couldn't find who was working on those issues, and so what we really focused on is how can we make this a more structured, rigorous process so that we can have a run book where anybody could ship dbt and follow the same standards so that when we push something live, not only the data users, but other production teams can know that if it's in this table, if it's in this API, it's reliable, it's been tested. It's not going to have issues. And if you do find issues, you know who to talk to, you can trace those issues down. And this has really helped us raise the quality that's given us more confidence to interface with other production parts of our stack. Another part of the kind of production grade aspect of our data platform is, no production system is perfect. So we really wanted to focus on embracing bugs in a more elevated cross-functional way. And so this is a screenshot from some uniqueness bugs from a release candidate build. And what we really wanted to do is start surfacing these issues in a place that it's not only just the data team goes and solves it, right? Because I think we've all been there. There's an issue in your data platform. Why does this table have some issues? And it magically gets fixed, right? Because a data engineer or an analytics engineer throws an if-then statement, handles that edge case, don't worry about it. Or they do a where clause and say, oh, just drop all those rows, right? Don't worry about it. But what we found is usually those root causes are related to other upstream systems, like maybe how front-end is collecting the data, or how a back-end database is doing some processing. And oftentimes, the solutions that are identified with more cross-functional leadership discussion are more scalable and more effective because they fix problems across the full production stack, and they're not just solved in isolation in your data pipelines. And so part of this was kind of getting comfortable and being more vulnerable and sharing in, we have cross-functional Scrum to Scrum meetings where we say, like, hey, it's not shipping right now because of these issues. Does anyone else know what's going on? And it's become a much more effective collaborative way to work with our other cross-functional leaders to really raise the bar around how do we get high quality data platforms by embracing bugs, which is not fun to do at the beginning, but I think it's really helped make us have higher performing systems ultimately. All right, so step number 4, and this is probably one of my favorite steps of the playbook, is because I think it really is a good example of how companies like Vida are redefining what it means for an organization to be data-driven. And so we've been focusing on establishing bidirectional hub and spoke models. Because at Vida, we've essentially gotten everybody building into dbt directly. So I say data teams here because we have teams that are not just data engineering and analytics engineering teams, but we have operations analysts, we have clinical researchers, health economists, finance analysts, building directly into dbt. And I think previously, hub and spoke models are not new to data teams. We've been doing this for years and years and years, but they've been really focused on getting all your data in the central platform and then getting data out, right? Which is fine, keep doing that, still important. But what we found is so much valuable analytics and data were being built in the spokes, but they weren't getting pushed back into the central platform to be reused in other places. And so a clinical research team might define a new metric, or they might identify a new segment with a new set of attributes, but it was really only used in this spoke. But what we found is, what if we could put it into our back-end applications, or into our revenue systems, or into other parts of the business, and it can add much more value more quickly from the beginning of a project. And so we've really focused on getting everybody comfortable that's using data to build in dbt. And so this didn't happen overnight, because you're essentially asking teams to change behavior. A lot of these teams are used to working with local SQL files or with their Python notebooks on their local, and you're essentially saying, like, use dbt, this thing you've never heard about. And so the way to do that was and apologies for kind of the small writing, but I wanted to give a visibility into the actual documentation and artifacts that we used. But the idea is that we listed out what does it actually take to build a metric pipeline. And we did this with these other data teams to make sure that we could understand, okay, there's common steps here. You're doing this step in your Python notebook. We can also do it in dbt. Let's just do it in dbt so we can all use it. And after we really identified those common ground steps, it enabled us to start building together and improving how we collaborated, organizing trainings to get people more comfortable with dbt, which helped us all start contributing directly into our stack more collectively. And so another part of this process was identifying common data sets to design them together with these cross-functional data teams. And so what we have here is an ERD that outlines how we design some of our data models for our clinical performance guarantees. And one thing to call out is we built these with our clinical researcher and health econ team, so that it wasn't just the data engineering and analytics engineering team saying, hey, you got to use dbt, here's a style guide, thank you, bye. But we wanted to do this in a collaborative process where we could design these tables together so that we could hopefully solve more problems across the company with how we use this data as one collective team. And so this is essentially turned into repeatable execution plans. And so we have a RACI matrix here that we use anytime we're building or maintaining a new metric pipeline, where we list out the different stages that go into, if we want to build a new metric pipeline, these are the different components, these are the different categories of work that we want to plan and design for, and these are the different teammates that can work on these different projects. And one thing to call out is by pretty much upskilling folks that could use dbt, we got extra sets of hands that could work in dbt, which is great. But the really big value add is that we're also bringing in way more domain expertise from other parts of the business. We're getting folks with finance backgrounds. We have a person who was formerly a registered dietitian who's now working in dbt. We have clinical researchers. So not only are they giving extra sets of hands to build in dbt, they're bringing so much domain knowledge from their areas of specialty, which is helping us design better data models, which then can be used in these downstream value delivery systems much more effectively and much more efficiently. And so I think this just is a good overview to how to really operationalize the execution of getting everybody into the dbt data platform party. All right, so last step, which is kind of the easy one after you've gone through step one through 4, it's essentially demonstrating and celebrating the hard work that's been done, which is probably the easiest one or the most fun one after the first 4 stages. Because at Vida, we're essentially able to get execs to ask, when is the next DBT drop? I've been working in data for a while. I've never heard an exec, this is an actual quote, I've never heard an exec say, hey, when is this going to get into your data platform? And this is something that's said by our VP of product management regularly, like, hey, when is DBT going to ship? Because we've created this association of when something gets built into DBT, something good happens for our members or for our customers or for our business. And so the way we did this is we just listed out the steps, which is seems easier said than done. But the idea is how can we itemize what happens after something gets built into DBT? Because we all here understand what that means, why DBT is important. But what was effective is going kind of beyond the data platform and saying, in this example, we ship DBT, so you get a new member attribute around their blood sugar, updates their program selection and their outcomes optimization engine, changes their pathway experience on the back end, updates their content recommended in the front end, changes their risk score, adds a table record to the billing model, gets the member to be healthier, makes more money for Vida, saves more money for Vida. Sorry, that was a mouthful. But the idea is to list out all the stages because it, one, helps the data teams better understand why this work is valuable, because it is. And then 2, it helps raise awareness with the other cross-functional technology, product, and business leaders understand why it's important to be building so many things into DBT, which I think we're all very aware of is an important thing to do. And so the last thing to call out is we wanted to make this a repeatable process. And so we built it into our release cadence where we essentially want to share this out on a regular basis. What is going into DBT? What are the initiatives and applications that it's supporting? And do it in a way that's cross-functional. So it's not just the data teams that understand what's going on, but we share this out in cross-functional Scrum team meetings and Slack channels where everybody can get awareness on what we're building into DBT. So we're having the conversations just like we're talking about what's getting built into iOS, what's getting built into Android, what's going into web. The same conversation is what's getting built into DBT, and this has been a really important, valuable part of the process to make it a regular conversation of putting data platform discussions at the same level that we're doing with other production applications. Cool. All right, so in recap, playbook for data-driven success, integrate into value delivery systems, encoding complex decision triggers, build a production-grade data platform, establish a bidirectional hub and spoke model, and demonstrating data value chain creation. And so a few things to call out here, which I think folks have probably picked up on, which is not just for this talk, but more broadly at Coalesce. I think the data platform strategies right now are really focused on how do you raise the technical rigor of how we operate our data platforms. 2, how do we embrace complexity? I think Tristan said complexity a handful of times in the opening keynote. But how do we really embrace complexity that goes into decision making and into the complex data pipelines that we're all building? And lastly, how do we over-index on communication, not just within the data teams, but with our other cross-functional business and technology leaders, is helping push data platform strategies to kind of have that seat at the table, like it's been said for many, many years now. But how do we make that a regular process where we're celebrating the work because it's valuable work and it's hard work, and I think it's exciting to see it really start to click where other business leaders are understanding the value of data platforms and making sure that they're being invested in properly. So that said, this framework has been very valuable for Vida, but looking forward, we're also focused on how do we think about how this will adapt, right? There's new capabilities, technologies coming out with LLMs, generative AI. I'm sure many folks here are starting to think about that as well. And what we're already seeing is that this has given a really good foundation, but acknowledging that we're going to need to adapt and evolve, but find ways to continue pushing data platform capabilities into other downstream delivery systems so that you can essentially have GPT plus data platform, Bard plus data platform. And so we haven't figured all that out yet, but the idea is if you have a strong foundation for your data platform strategy, it should enable future adaptability in a much more streamlined, scalable way. Cool. All right. Well, on that note, thank you, everybody, for listening and participating in the quick audience poll at the beginning. If you have any questions or want to chat afterwards, please feel free to find me. Hopefully this was valuable for everybody, and thank you.